Hello, thank you for being part of Banned Books Week, and welcome to our webinar, Breaking Bans, a celebration of challenged books. I'm Donna Seaman, adult books editor at Booklist. I would like to thank everyone for joining us for this very special event and for supporting inclusive reading. Before we begin, I would like to direct you all to the Unite Against Book Bans website, where you can find resources that will help you raise awareness about and combat censorship. This includes downloadable graphics, talking points, contact information for local officials, grassroots organizing guides, and more. A link to this website will be shared with all registrants after the webinar, or you can visit the URL on the screen to get started. And now for some technical details. The audience is in listen-only mode, but we welcome any questions you may have. On the bottom of your screen is a toolbar with a section for Q&A. If you have a question or need technical assistance, simply click Q&A and type your message into the box that appears. We will do our best to respond to all tech-related questions, and we'll pass along all other questions to today's panelists so they can follow up with you after the webinar. Also, Booklist offers closed captioning on all webinars. To enable or disable captions on your screen, please look for and click the live transcript icon on the toolbar. From there, you can select show or hide subtitles from the menu. If you choose to enable subtitles, you can adjust the size of the captions at any time by selecting subtitle settings. All right, onward. We have an extraordinary panel today. We will begin the webinar with a brief presentation by each author about their book, and then Dr. Emily Knox will moderate a discussion. Please allow me to tell you about Dr. Knox. Dr. Knox is an associate professor in the School of Information Sciences at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. She received her PhD from the doctoral program at the Rutgers University School of Communication and Information. Emily's master's in library and information science is from the iSchool of Illinois. Dr. Knox also holds a BA in religious studies from Smith College and an MA in the same field from the University of Chicago Divinity School. Her research interests include information access, intellectual freedom and censorship, information ethics, information policy, and the intersection of print culture and reading practices. Emily is also a member of the Mapping Information Access Research Team. Her new book, Foundations of Intellectual Freedom, from ALA Neil Schumann, will be available this December. Welcome, Emily. I'm so glad you're here. All right, I am going to introduce our author panelists one by one. We will begin with Nikole Hannah-Jones. Nikole is a Pulitzer Prize-winning reporter covering racial injustice for the New York Times Magazine. She is also creator of the landmark 1619 Project. In 2017, Nikole received a MacArthur Foundation Fellowship, the Genius Grant, for her work on educational inequality. She has also won a Peabody Award, 2 George Polk Awards, 3 National Magazine Awards, and the 2018 John Chancellor Award for Excellence in Journalism from Columbia University. In 2016, Nikole Hannah-Jones co-founded the Ida B. Wells Society for Investigative Reporting, a training and mentorship organization geared toward increasing the number of investigative reporters of color. Hannah-Jones is the Knight Chair in Race and Journalism at Howard University, where she has founded the Center for Journalism and Democracy. In 2021, Nikole was named one of Time Magazine's 100 most influential people in the world. We are so honored to have you here today, Nikole.
Hi, thank you. Thank you so much for that. So I'm going to begin by just briefly stating what the book is about, and I won't take up too much time on that, but the 1619 Project is a book that released last November, and it was based on a magazine project that the New York Times Magazine produced in August of 2019, commemorating the 400th anniversary of the first Africans being sold into slavery in Virginia. And what the project does through a series of essays, as well as prose and poetry and photography, is try to make the argument that slavery has been treated as foundational or as an asterisk to the American story, when really it is foundational to the American story. And that so much about our modern society has been shaped by the legacy of slavery, even though we often erase those connections. And why I think that this book is important for people to read is I just think books are important for people to read. And I hope that people want to read this book because it challenges settled narratives about our country. It helps us to better understand the country that actually exists, as opposed to the mythological version of the country that many of us have been taught to believe, but that doesn't actually explain our country to us. And because I hope that it rightfully puts Black Americans and our contributions at the center of the American narrative where they belong. So in the classroom, what I hope this book does is lead students to question narratives, to be skeptical of the histories we've been taught and who do those histories and narratives serve. I hope they lead students to more closely examine the world that they live in and how the past is shaping that as well. And I hope that that's what readers of all ages take away from the 1619 Project. And now I'm going to pass this on to my co-author on the children's book under 1619 Project called Born on the Water, my dear friend, Renée Watson.
Thank you so much, Nikole. Yes, Renée Watson. Renée is the New York Times bestselling author of the 1619 Project, Born on the Water. Her young adult novel, Piecing Me Together from Bloomsbury, received a Newbery Honor and Coretta Scott King Award. Her books for young readers include Harlem's Little Blackbird, the story of Florence Mills, which was nominated for an NAACP Image Award, and Ways to Make Sunshine, which received the Golden Kite Award from the Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators. Renée has given readings and lectures at such renowned places as the United Nations, the Library of Congress, and the US embassies in Japan and New Zealand. Renée is on the Council of Writers for the National Writing Project, and she is a member of the Academy of American Poets Education Advisory Council. To learn more about Renée's work, visit her at reneewatson.net. Thanks for joining us, Renée.
Thank you so much for having me. And thank you, Nikole, for the groundbreaking work that you did and for inviting me to be a part of the 1619 Project and co-writing Born on the Water with you. So Born on the Water tells the story of a little girl who is wondering, where does she come from? She gets that assignment that so many of us had as young people, asking to draw the flag of your people. And she's not quite sure because she can't count back that many generations. And so the book tells the story of her going home and asking her grandmother where her people come from. And then we learn about the people who were enslaved and how their story began. We decided to begin this story where it did begin, in West Africa, instead of starting with slavery. And so I think that that's important, and something that I hope young people take away from reading the book is that Black folks come from brilliant people and from a place of joy, and that we weren't just slaves only. Like, there was so much about who these people were before they were captured and brought here to build this country. And so I hope that young people who are reading the book, especially Black Americans, that they feel a sense of pride with this origin story that, like Nikole said, centers them in the making of America, in the United States of America. And that they feel like they are connected to ancestors, and they have a people, and they have something to be proud of, and that they can be proud of this flag because this country is theirs. And then I hope that folks who are not Black, who are reading the book, learn about Black folks in the United States, and also realize the allies and the coming alongside of people to fight for justice. So we're hoping that young people can grow from this book and see themselves as a continuum of change, and building on to what ancestors did for us, that they too can now figure out, what do I do to help make this democracy what it's supposed to be and help America live up to its promise. So that's our hope for the book, that young people learn where they're from and they want to tell the story of where they're from, and that they look forward to their future to make our country a great country that it could be.
Thank you so much, Renee. Now we'll hear from Kim Johnson. Kim held leadership positions in social justice organizations as a teen. She's now a college administrator who maintains civic engagement throughout the community while also mentoring Black student activists and leaders. This Is My America was her debut novel, and her second novel, Invisible Sun, will be out in June of 2023. Kim holds degrees from the University of Oregon and the University of Maryland College Park. Kim is bi-coastal, living in Oregon and Maryland with her husband and 2 kids. Find her at kcjohnsonwrites.com and follow her on Twitter and Instagram at kcjohnsonwrites. Kim, we're so happy you're here.
Thank you so much. It really is an honor to be here today and to be amongst such amazing other authors too as well. You know, my novel, This Is My America, released in the summer of 2020 and takes an unflinching, yet hopeful look at the injustices in our American justice system through the eyes of a 17-year-old Black girl named Tracy Beaumont. And in this story, Tracy Beaumont writes letters to Innocence X, asking the organization to help her father, who's an innocent man on death row. And after 7 years, Tracy runs out of time. Her dad has only 267 days left. And this is where the story reflects so much of society and what happens in society. But in this story, it's considered to be unthinkable, which the police arrive in the night and her older brother is then suspected of killing a local white girl in the community. It's a story that evolves in thinking about our justice system, whose truths get to be told, who has access to equal justice, representation. It's a story that really takes on a lot of the elements when I was a young person thinking about what does it mean to be an activist, and puts at the forefront a character who was determined and fearless to fight for justice. And that's really why I always want to push young people, especially, to read this work, because I want them to see themselves in what's possible and the power that they can do when they use their voice and their mind and their power to make change. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Kim. Well, we're now going to talk about Kyle Lukoff. Kyle is the author of many books for young readers. His debut middle grade novel, Too Bright to See, received a Newbery Honor, the Stonewall Award, and was a National Book Award finalist. Kyle's picture book, When Aiden Becomes a Brother, also won the Stonewall Medal. He has forthcoming books about mermaids, babies, apologies, and lots of other topics. While becoming a writer, he worked as a bookseller for 10 years and then 9 years as a school librarian. Thanks for being here, Kyle.
Thanks so much, Donna. The book that you see on your screen is my most recent novel called Different Kinds of Fruit, which is about a girl named Annabelle who starts to develop a crush on a new classmate of hers who's non-binary, and through that finds out that her dad is a transgender man who has not told her that until just now. My most recent picture book is also my first nonfiction book. It's called If You're a Kid Like Gavin, and I co-wrote it with young trans activist Gavin Grimm, and it follows his story about when he had to sue his high school to allow him to use the boys' bathroom as a transgender boy, which I think the state of Virginia is now trying to go back on, even though I believe he won his case in the Fourth Circuit. But the books that I have that are the most currently banned are my 2 picture books, When Aiden Became a Brother and Call Me Max. Similarly to what Nikole said earlier, I see my books as, like all literature, as a way to ask questions that I have about the world and as a way to explore my own answers to those questions, but also let readers do their own asking and their own answering through the collaborative process of writing. So I am not sure that I would say that I have reasons that I want people to read my books, because I want people to read my books if they are drawn to them, if they have questions about the things that I have questions about, if they want to see themselves or see other kinds of people in ways that I present them. But we also know that a lot of book banning is undergirded by this idea that inquisitiveness itself is a threat, and that searching for answers is that one should not search for answers. One should only be given answers by approved sources. So while, of course, from like a promotional angle, I should say that I want people to read my books because that is how I sell copies of my books. But I'm less concerned about my specific titles than I am about a larger culture of bravery in art and literature.
Thank you all so much for telling us about the books as books. Sometimes in banned and challenge bookcases, the books become symbols rather than actual things that you can read and learn from. So my first question is a follow-up to you talking about your books. Have you heard from your readers about how your book has impacted them? And I'll start with Kyle, and we'll go back through from Kyle to Kim to Renee to Nikole.
Sure. I get so many letters from people who have read my books with different kinds of fruit. The most letters that I get are from fellow queer or trans adults who are seeing themselves in the parents of my books. But I'm also hearing from kids who see themselves a lot as the Bailey character or the Annabelle character. I heard about a kid who named himself Max after Max in one of my books. And one time I did an event at a public library where a little boy brought his own copy of When Aiden Became a Brother, and he had his hair styled just like Aiden's. And he was flipping through the pages as I was reading, and I saw him point to his favorite page as I was going. And those kinds of moments are also really beautiful.
Thank you. Kim?
Yeah, I've had all kinds of experiences, and I think the thing that I found most interesting that I never imagined when I was writing my book is the range of people that would be responding to my work. I expected to be teenagers who would be the ones that would be responding to my work. Can you guys hear me? It's not working? No. Okay. Let me just try to fix it again. My mic. Maybe this will work better. Okay, is this better?
Yes.
Yay, okay. Without a microphone is better. So what I was sharing was that I think the thing that's most amazing to me that I never thought would happen, or it was not even a thought in my mind, is the range of people that would be responding to my work. I thought it would be teenagers, and I was hoping it would be Black teenagers who would see themselves in this work. But I've received messages from 11-year-old white kids who don't have any experiences being around anyone who of another race who write, I want to do something different. I want to be a part of making change. That's not something, I would hope for that, but that's not, I didn't expect to get that kind of message. I never expected to get messages from senior centers where an entire senior community of 80-year-old plus people read my book as a group. I never imagined that. And it's almost always positive. It's almost always about, I've seen myself, I saw my mother in this story. I want to make change. How can I be involved? I'm a writer too. Tracy was a journalist. Now I'm inspired to do more with what I'm doing. And it's those kinds of things that I do what I do and moves me every day.
For Renee, how have you heard from your readers about how the book has impacted them?
So one of the most special things was when the book came out, teachers and parents started posting photos of little girls who were wearing their hair in the hairstyle of the character in the book. And it was just so beautiful to see such beaming pride from young girls, especially who were excited to see a girl with hair that looked like her, something that might feel so simple, but they were so excited that this character was wearing her hair in the way that they could wear their hair. So just before they're even reading the words and getting into anything that the story is about, just that representation alone was impactful. And I was very, very moved by getting all those photos. And then a classroom visit that Nikole and I did just confirmed that young people want to have these conversations, are ready to have them, and have a lot to say. We were very moved and impressed and inspired by the students' questions and their thoughtfulness towards each other and their openness to want to share their own stories. So it's been inspiring to see young people respond through art and poetry as well, telling their own stories about where they're from.
And to Nikole.
Yes, I mean, it's hard to really describe what the response has been to the 1619 project, both the adult book and the children's book. It's been truly the most gratifying thing in my entire career. You know, response from Black readers who I created the project for, often saying, you know, they didn't learn any of this and that they had sensed much of what the project was arguing, but didn't have the facts to back it up, couldn't make the arguments. Black Americans, descendants of slavery in particular, who you know, really related to my opening anecdote about my father flying his flag, and really the tension that Black Americans all feel in relationship to our country and what does patriotism look like, and you know, just the affirmation. So I had a 12-year-old, I gave a talk in Arlington, Virginia last night. I had a 12-year-old there, and you know, had a 85-year-old Black woman there who were all saying that this work has been powerful in their self-conception, but also just in how the world or the country sees them. And then, you know, hearing from people who are not Black, who also have been taught the same deficient history and understanding of Black Americans and the role of slavery in the United States. And the thing that kind of sticks out to me that I never forget, I met this this young lady of Southeast Asian descent in Philadelphia public schools. And she said that she'd never been taught about the Immigration and Nationality Act and the way that the Black freedom struggle during the Civil Rights movement ended the racist immigration quotas that prevented most Black and Brown and Asian immigrants from coming into the United States, and that she had never been taught that her very existence in this country came on the backs of Black resistance struggles, and the fact that her family was able to relocate to the United States and into a country that legal discrimination had been banished because of the Black civil rights struggle, that having that understanding changed her entire understanding of her country and of the Black community that she was going to school in. And so that to me is really powerful. And I hear those stories just all the time. And that is what I wanted the 1619 Project to do, to reframe our understanding of Black people specifically, but our country more general. So yeah, it's been overwhelming.
Thank you all for sharing those stories. Now we're going to move on to talking about book banning. So how have you personally reacted to the rise in book banning across the country? And have you heard from a teacher or librarian who has specifically fought for your book? And if so, can you share it? And I'll toss it back to you, Nikole.
So my main, well, I have lots of responses to book banning. One of the first things that I wanted to do was to launch a banned book tour. And that's what we're doing. So specifically going into states that are trying to ban or have banned the 1619 Project through legislation. So going into Florida, going into Texas, I just went into Virginia, which of course passed not only an anti-CRT law, but created a tip line for students and parents to report their educators. So I thought it was really important. Oklahoma, which also banned CRT and is trying to legislate against the 1619 Project. So to actually go into those states in very public, big ways and promote not just the project, but to speak out against book bans in general, to really, I've changed my book talks. All my book talks are now about democracy and how a society that is banning books is a society that is losing democracy, that is losing its freedoms, and really trying to show that support to educators and librarians who are losing their jobs over the right to learn and the right to teach, and really trying to uphold particularly librarians and educators as professionals who know what is appropriate to teach children and how to appropriately teach children, and to just show that public support for educators. And again, I always knew, most of the anti-CRT laws, they began with efforts to ban the 1619 Project, and then they blossomed out to these larger efforts to ban anti-racist texts that deal with gender and sexuality. And it was always clear that these bans were never just going to be about one thing, that these bans are about trying to repress the understanding of difference, trying to stymie tolerance of people who live in our community. So I've tried to become just extremely vocal in pushing back against these bans.
Renee, have you heard things about the picture book?
Oh, absolutely, for sure. And other of my books too, which is interesting. And to Nicole's point, I feel, it isn't just the kind of maybe obvious books that you would think about with book banning, right? It's also, I am the author of the Ryan Hart series, Piecing Me Together, Watch Us Rise. Those books are also being banned too. So it's the silencing of Black voices, it's not wanting white kids to feel uncomfortable in classrooms. All of that is a part of, what's happening. So I've been trying to support teachers. I've been donating books to districts that are being told that they can't have those books in the library, or donating to free libraries and communities. I'm doing teacher trainings on how to have conversations in the classroom with young people about race and class and the intersections of race, class, and gender. I'm really just trying to be a support and asking teachers, what do you need right now? I have met so many educators who are about this work, and they are fighting back, and they're finding ways to make sure that even if they can't put it in their curriculum and teach a whole unit using a book, that they can still have a book list or share, here are some of my favorite books if you want to check them out on your own. So I'm just trying to support teachers and be there for them, and thank them for what they're doing, because I know, like Nikole said, teachers are getting fired and losing their jobs because they are giving books to young people. And that is a problem in a society that says we are a democracy and that we value freedom. And so I'm concerned heavily about that, and just wanting to make sure that they have support and that young people are still getting books into their hands.
Go ahead, Kim.
Yeah, and really similar to Renee, talking with teachers, educators, librarians, the connection that I've had with librarians has been particularly important, because they're another way to go past the schools, because a lot of the movements are happening within schools. And so our libraries can be a safe haven for a lot of that work. Something that I'm really intentional with a lot of the visits that I do and the young people that I interact with is really looking at them and talking to them about these issues, because oftentimes they're not necessarily hearing about them. And I really try to invoke that call to action about the power that they have in not being reactive, because I think that's a lot of the challenges, is that there's no rhyme or reason. As Renee is sharing, some of the if you're banning some of Renee's books that aren't, if you just change the skin color and the experiences, there should be no reason. So we know why they're doing it. We know that they're targeting and picking on particular communities about these works. And so if we're just reactive in trying to sort of figure out what those books are without actually having a sort of a plan that you come into. And so I was working with a library in the Midwest, and they did something that I found to be really impactful. And that was that they just created a process that they have to evaluate every book. And for many ways, that sounds like a negative thing of like, okay, you know, now what's going to happen? But really what it does, it is that's your response then. Well, it went through our process and we've evaluated, and we find that this book is will stand in this area. The other thing that I found to be really helpful and supportive is just the community. Because you can't have these issues come and parents being very quiet who care, because if you talk to a lot of parents, you talk to a lot of people, you actually do have more people who want to have an inclusive, diverse book, but they actually don't know how to make an impact, and they don't know what to do. And a lot of it is just talking with people about showing up. You got to be present. You got to show up. You have to support your teachers. Don't let them feel like they're alone, because then a lot of things that happen is that it doesn't even reach the point where a book is banned. A book is just quietly taken away because they received an email and they're so worried that something is going to happen and blow up. And I'm more concerned about that, because the book banning, at least it's public. You can see what's happening, but when you don't know what's happening, you don't know why a book isn't on the shelf anymore. That's incredibly dangerous, because you don't know how to advocate for that particular book.
And we'll go to Kyle.
So in January of 2021, so over a year ago, it was my first real experience with being at the middle of, in the center of a sort of banning firestorm as an author. I found out that I believe a third grade teacher in Salt Lake City had read Call Me Max to her class because one of her trans students said, hey, this is a book about a kid like me. Can you read it to my friends? And the teacher was like, yeah, of course, I'd love to. And it created this huge controversy in that community. What's really interesting actually is that it was on, so I flew out to Salt Lake City to meet the family, to meet the teacher. There was a rally at the Capitol that I spoke at. And that was actually the first time that I had also heard that like conservative white parents were going after like what they called CRT, which of course isn't actually critical race theory. It's just talking about children, talking to children about race and racism. And that was the first time that I heard that CRT was also a similar like cause celeb of a lot of these parents, which to me really just proves, as if it needed proof, that this like anti-trans, anti-queer, anti-Black activism is just all like entwined in a larger root of like white supremacy and like violent nationalism. And it is, of course, not just about these books, which we know. From there, a similar situation happened in Austin, Texas, not too long after that, in February or March of 2021, and it just hasn't stopped since then. I watched a YouTube video of a parent reading Call Me Max aloud in front of a school board to like cheers of disgust and derision. I've gotten, you know, not as many death threats and hate mail as some of my colleagues, but you know, enough to make me feel unhappy about it. But in those, whenever that happens, I also always hear from people who live in those communities who are telling me about what they're doing with their friends and neighbors to not stand up for me, but to stand up for themselves, because it's, again, not about me. It's about, you know, everyone that we share these parts of our identities with.
Could I just add something, just for clarity? So there is no justification for banning a book. And even knowing why your book is being banned, or if a book is talking about something political or historical, there still is not an excuse to ban a book. You can say, I don't think I want my child to be in class that day when you discuss the book, or this is not a book that I want my child to check out from the library. As a parent, you certainly have that right. But there is no justification. And what we know from what's happening, I mean, in Tennessee, they tried to ban the true story of Ruby Bridges. In Georgia, at a school named after a man who had been born into slavery, they tried to ban the book that talked about his life in slavery. So we just have to be clear that there's really nothing, these bans are not really about trying to protect children. It's about politics. It's about politicizing people who are on, who are seen as being marginal or on the fringes, or who can be scapegoated in order to gain political power. And so no matter really what the book is or what reasoning there is, there is no good reason to do so. And there is no rhyme or reason to why books are being targeted, except that they are seen as a tool for larger political gains.
So I think my next question is really, has there been anything surprising that you've heard? And I'll open this up to everyone. Because we know book bans are in many ways sometimes purely symbolic, as Nikole just said. Has there been anything surprising about what you've heard when people talk about your book that you was unexpected, or from either side? I'm just curious if there are any stories that you have.
That was not a list of questions we got, so I'm gonna have to think for a minute.
I guess I'll just add, and I want to say thank you for Nikole for sharing that, because that is important to clarify that for sure. I think the thing that's always so, I don't know if it's surprising, because it's not really surprising, but I always find it fascinating when there's just a line that's taken out of a book and it's often used. And so you usually hear at a PTA meeting or a board meeting, and they take one sentence completely out of context, and it always is it's just, to me, it's always very clear that there's an agenda that's specific there, because if you read before that line and after that line, it's all about the context of that, but it's all about the sort of the flashy talking point, and I've seen that used so many times, and especially with certain books, and using one particular line or one particular sentence as a way of just trying to hammer a particular point, knowing that they likely haven't read the book. So they don't even know what they're really talking about, but it seems to be so prominent with how they're utilizing, pushing on, particular agendas.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would second that, the fact that people don't read most of the books they're banning, as not really being surprising, but should be, because if you are going to use the power of the state, right, it's the government that is deciding. You would think that the bar for prohibiting speech in a society where the very First Amendment gives us a constitutional right to free speech, would be that you have to actually read the text that you are seeking to bar. And it is always clear with the 1619 Project, clear with so many of these books that are being banned, by the way that the books are talked about, that the people who are actually implementing laws or other policies against the books have not read them. And it seems like at the very minimum, you should have had to have read the book. And I think the other thing that surprised me is how organized this effort around book bans has become. That Penn just released a big report the other day that showed that there are some 2,200 efforts to ban books and titles across the country in some 50 groups, many of them with chapters in different states and communities that are organizing to get books banned. And it seems like those of us who believe in the freedom to learn and who do not believe a society should be banning books are not that organized, not nearly as organized as the opposition, even though I don't think they represent, the polling shows they don't represent most Americans, but because they are so organized, they are extremely effective in a way that groups representing free speech are not.
So I will never really be surprised by homophobia and fanphobia. I unfortunately will never be surprised by the failures of the left to organize robustly in the face of any kind of rising fascism or what have you. But there actually was a couple of things that really surprised me when Call Me Max and When Aiden Became a Brother were starting to make these fun rounds, the merry-go-round that we're all on. And it's that there's a line in When Aiden Became a Brother at the end where mom says, "When you were born, we didn't know you were going to be our son. We made some mistakes, but you helped us fix them." And there's a similar line in Call Me Max where it says, when a baby is born, the grown-ups make a decision about if you're a boy or a girl. And sometimes the grown-ups make a mistake and they say that you're a girl when you're really a boy or whatever. And I found out that some parents are fixating really heavily on the idea that a parent could make a mistake and taking significant issue with that. And that aligns really neatly with the way that these bans are being framed is the idea of like parental rights, and this idea that you get to control what information your child has access to, and that your child is in some ways like an extension of your own will, and that your children are in some ways your property that you get to do with what you will, and that you are the one who gets to decide for them. And the idea of introducing the fact that maybe grown-ups sometimes make mistakes has been latched upon as evidence of these books corrupting influences. And that was surprising to me.
I'll add that, so not, again, we're all saying not surprised, but in this case, maybe I can say pleasantly surprised or encouraged by young people who, in response to books being banned, I cannot remember the city, but there were young people who had a read-in of the books that were being banned. And then I've also met a young lady who she started her own book club virtually. So it's outside of school time. And every book that they're gonna read for this year are books that are being banned. So I am excited about young people. We were talking about, how we're not so good at organizing maybe as adults, but young people are on fire and are ready to do something and want to be a part of the conversation and are trying to find ways to at least within their own smaller communities, still read these books and connect through literature, which I think is powerful, because I don't know that we even talk about the fact that there are so many young people who want to read, and the books that are reflecting young people's lives and the real world that they live in. If those books are being erased, we have a whole generation of people who will never feel seen or validated, and that their stories don't matter and who they are do not matter. So that they're uniting and still finding those mirrors in books is powerful to me, and I'm encouraged by that.
So I'd like to move to a topic that's a little bit discouraging, but I'm quite concerned about the chilling effect that these challenges are having on writers and creators. So we're going to pivot a little bit, and a question from the audience is, it's terrible that authors, artists face death threats for their work. What do you need to know to prepare for this? And I'll open that up to anybody who's received, if you'd like to share about how you prepare yourself or you respond to these threats, and how other authors or writers might think about this as they work.
A lot of therapy. Can always recommend finding professionals to talk to about your emotional responses to things. And then on the more practical side, a lot of different organizations offer, God, what are they called? There's ways to keep you safe online, like ways to erase your address, your phone number, to prevent you from being doxxed, to prevent your family from being doxxed. That's actually something that I warned my parents about. I said, if they start coming for me, they may also start coming for you. And bless my 7-year-old mother's heart, she said, it's worth it. So I love my mom. And yeah, I've only gotten a couple. So I'm also not an expert on responding to these things. I'm still relatively new to that.
I mean, I've become somewhat of an expert, but I don't give good advice here. So that's why I'm just, I'm not going to recommend people respond the way that I respond. So I will remain silent.
I'm curious if you'd like to share, but I also don't want to push you to if you don't feel like sharing in public.
I just don't think it's that useful for other people. I mean, what I will say is the Times did kind of strongly to the point where I could not say no, want to send a security expert to my house to make sure that my house was safe, but I'm very much into privacy and I don't want to self-surveil myself. So I didn't agree with most of that, but they did help to, as you said, Kyle, kind of provide security for my online footprint. So to try to purge as much information, but I'm too much of a public figure, so it doesn't really work like it should. And my, I guess I just, I expect that when you do this type of work, particularly the type of work that I was doing and am doing, that people are going to come for you. And I just really have refused to alter my life in any way because of that, because that is why people threaten you. They want you to have fear. They want you to self-censor. They want you to be quiet. And I just, but I'm not saying I advise that for other people, which is why I said that is everyone can't respond in that way. And there were certainly lots of nights drinking too much bourbon. But in general, I just think, this, to me, it is an affirmation of the power of the work, of the importance of the work, and coming from a long line of Black folks in this country who have had a price to pay and understood there would be a price to pay for trying to speak truth to powerful people. To me, it just is expected and something that I have to deal with as a writer.
I think the only thing I'll add, since I haven't really received some major threats, I think it's more of things you see on social media. And maybe what's common with a lot of writers is there's a lot of, when you take book banning and other things aside, there's a lot of reviews that are racist or homophobic, that really sort of pound our reviews a lot, and people talking about our work. And I think to be in a really healthy space as a writer is that you have to really, for me, I step aside from that I don't, if I see a response with an egghead of one person who wants to sort of say something negatively or say that my work is trying to push a particular agenda, is that I have to sort of also keep my sanity, because I want to keep creating. I want to continue to work on the types of work that I'm doing that are sort of moving issues around systemic challenges and issues. And that piece, I think, is really important, is to really balance understanding yourself and what's healthy for you and what's healthy for how you respond, so that you can continue to do the work. Because if it's impacting you so much you can't do the work, then they do win. And so I've really tried not to respond or tried not to focus on, if a review is sent to me or I'm tagged on it, and if I can tell where it's going, I won't really engage in it at all. I have had some friends read it to me, but do it in a really sort of joking manner. And that's therapeutic, because then you're sort of making mockery of sort of the ignorance that's there. And that is another sort of healthy way that I've done.
Some practical things that I have put in place just to take care of myself is to, I'm anchored to some strong Black women in my life. And there's the public life you have, but we are all humans, and we're people who happen to write and create and do these things. But at my core, I have a family, I have friends, I have people who know me and love me deeply. And those are the people I go to when I need somebody to lean on. And that is often that I need people in my corner. So I ask for help, I talk, I vent, and all the things to just make sure that I'm staying focused on why I'm doing what I'm doing. And so that I don't quit or don't get so scared that I just silence myself. So I think talking to people is important. You have to talk to everybody, but I think you need a good one or two people in your corner who just have you and can hold space for you when you need them to. And I also take breaks. I think it's important to rest, and sometimes you just need to step away. So I have learned how to do that in recent years. I'm getting better and better at setting that kind of boundary, that you just cannot always have access to me because it is a lot. It's draining sometimes. And sometimes we got to go refill the well too. So I think about all of that. Self-care has become like a cliche thing to say at this point, but the really foundation of self-care was a revolutionary act to actually care for yourself, especially when you're doing the work of resistance and social justice and all of that. So I do think that that's important, alongside all the practical things that we've talked about, like security and making sure your online stuff is safe and all of that, and that your publishers know what's going on and will also believe you when you say you're being harassed, and that they will have your back. All of that is important too.
So my next question is really about, along with writers, librarians, educators, and especially our public institutions are on the front lines of this war against book banning. So what words of advice or encouragement would you give to the people who are working in our public schools and public libraries? And I'll open up to anybody who would like to answer.
I mean, mine is really thank you. We need you. You know, I write books so that they can land in places, whether that's a bookstore, a little library on the corner of someone's house, or the public library or the schools. And I can't do that if I don't have the people on the other end doing it. And so anything that I'm doing, I'm hoping I'm giving to them. And I appreciate them giving back to us by having our words be reaching. You know, for me, I'm always thinking about young people, but I know that the reach is much wider than that. I think other encouragements is that there are a lot of supporters. There are people, you know, you can do a lot with a few. And oftentimes we feel like we need an army, but we don't. There's been so many movements are built off of a handful of people who then bring on another person, who then brings on another person. And you do have people who care and are willing. So I think that's how I would look at the people around me.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just say, outside of being a writer, public libraries and public schools saved my life. Like I was a working class Black kid and could walk to my public library and was always in that library getting books, even records. I got Like a Virgin when it came out. I checked the album out from my public library. And so it just, you know, I came from a tiny Midwestern town and had no examples of what I might want to become in the world or all that the world could be. And I found that in books and with access to free books, because my parents couldn't buy me all the books that I wanted to read. I read too fast to keep up with what my parents could buy. Public educators are the one who taught me, you know, Mrs. Blau in third grade was the first person who ever told me I could write. Mr. Ray Dowell, in my high school African American studies teacher, is the man who put the book that taught me about 1619 in my hand and encouraged me to become a journalist on my high school paper. So I know how hard this work always is, but how particularly hard it is now. And I just hope you know that I know I don't have to tell you that you are transforming lives, you are affirming lives, and in those low moments, just understand, I imagine all of us in this room would not be where we are if we didn't have people like you in our lives, and you are a blessing to so many children across this country. So thank you.
Yeah, I echo those sentiments. Just thank you. And I always talk about seed time and harvest, and thinking about sometimes this work is really about planting. We don't always get to see the harvest of of our labor, right? So I am hoping that you remember those teachers who impacted you and know that you are doing that for somebody, and that's a really real thing. And that we need you, so please don't give up. And I know you can be tired, so that's why I said earlier, like leaning on your people so that you can do this work, because like Nikole said, I feel like I know that I would not be the writer that I am, but also the person I am, because books help me practice empathy and learn about other people and grow into myself. And so you are literally shaping the future, and we thank you for that. And I just hope that you know that this work that you're doing matters. Sometimes we talk about activism with this capital A, like you have to be, you know, doing something really big or famous or on a, you know, got the loudest mic, but that little book that you hand into a student's hand is an act, and it is important, and it is also revolutionary too. So I just want to encourage you all to keep doing the good work, and thank you.
I generally try to avoid giving like blanket advice or encouragement to people that I'm not like talking to, because I don't know, I just don't do that. But a point that I've been trying to make for a long time now is that I've been encouraging teachers, librarians, and then anyone else in this line of work to divest yourself of the idea or the hope that you can make everybody happy, and to emphasize that in these times, it is imperative to actually take a side and to identify your own values, to name them, and then to live by them. Because this idea that we can make everyone happy, that that every voice matters, that we should be listening to all sides of an issue, that, you know, that all sides need equal time and equal air, will only benefit those whose side is aiming for extermination. And I would prefer for that not to happen. So I'm hoping that people are taking this moment to actually decide what they believe in and who they value, and to work towards that end, because the other side is certainly doing that.
Thank you all so much. Are there any closing thoughts you'd like to give to our audience during Banned Books Week? One question that was asked is from the audience is, do you have a favorite banned book that's not your own? Or is there other ideas that you would give to support your fellow writers, even writers that you do not necessarily agree with?
I love Toni Morrison. She's always being banned, and I will forever say her name and make sure that people know her work, that younger people who are rising into adulthood know who she is, and make sure that they have her books.
She's literally sitting over my left shoulder right here.
I didn't even see her there until you pointed it out. Yes, yes.
Well, I
I
want
mean,
to, oh,
I feel like I'm talking a lot, but you asking questions. So Toni Morrison, James Baldwin, I mean, go down the list, Ta-Nehisi Coates, Stamped from the Beginning. I mean, so many of the books that are banned are books that I've read and embraced, and understand why people who are afraid ban books like that, because those books have power, and they give a sense of power to people who have been taught that they are to exist at the margins. And the advice I would give to writers, I mean, I'm a journalist, so I didn't get into this profession to make powerful people comfortable. That is the very nature of becoming a journalist, is to expose the way that power uses its power against the vulnerable. And so if people were not targeting my work, I would be failing at my work. And I would just suggest that writers, if you are doing the type of journalism or writing that I do, or if you're writing about people who have been dehumanized and people who are being legislated against, keep writing. That means you're doing the right thing. And the fact that they're coming after your work means that you're doing the right thing. So, you know, buck up and keep doing what you got to do.
So an embarrassing fact about me is that my high school yearbook picture for my senior year has a quotation underneath it. There's something in my library to offend everyone. I was like 17 years old. And while that is still true, a lot of those books are now living on a shelf in my house labeled, I hate this book.
Mm-hmm.
And I keep these books so I can read them and understand them, and then hopefully try to discredit them with my own work and writing about them. I am now less invested in making sure that all books have equal space, and more invested in making sure that the people fighting for the rights of us to live, survive, and thrive are the ones who are prioritized over those who would argue the opposite.
Yeah, and the only thing that I would add, I was gonna say Beloved was my book that I was gonna go list a book. The first books that sort of like really shook me and woke me up. But I think really read widely. I think that's really important. There's so much beautiful work that's out there, and to do that. And I would say with writers, especially for me being, you know, a debut writer and knowing so many writers who want to have their work published and are really fearful that their opportunity has now sort of cut off because of concerns that maybe a publisher won't want to take them on, is that you need to keep writing. You need to tell your stories. You cannot have the sort of outside world influence your work because it's always shifting and changing, and your work's important. And that it's important to also raise up other people. This is not, as authors, we might write our works, often in quiet spaces, but we aren't alone, and we need to be able to help each other and lift other books up, so that people know of great books to read. And so if you hear about a book being banned, yes, let's talk about, let's everyone read that book and these 10 other books that people really should know about and support their works.
Thank you all so much. I just want to remind everyone that it is the 40th anniversary of the Island Trees versus Pico Supreme Court decision that gave all students the freedom to read books in their library. And it might interest you all to know that some of the books that were removed from the list included A Hero Ain't Nothing But a Sandwich by Alice Childress, Black Boy by Richard Wright, and Soul on Ice by Eldridge Cleaver. I think that there's no mistake that we are still trying to make sure that people have the right to read, and that is really something we are working towards during this Banned Books Week. So thank you all very much.
And thank you so much, Dr. Emily Knox, for that fantastic conversation. Thank you, Nikole, Renee, Kim, and Kyle, for sharing your writing, your experiences, and your thoughts. It's all very moving and inspiring. As for the audience, you will all receive a copy of the video recording and a certificate of completion tomorrow. Email webinars@booklistonline.com if you have any questions. If you're looking for more resources to help fight banned books, and let's all make the effort, you can visit Penguin Random House Banned Books Resources Hub. For information about banned titles, events, shareables, and organizations championing the right to read and freedom of expression, visit tinyurl.com Banned Books Resource Hub. It's a phenomenal site. As we mentioned earlier in the program, you can also visit Unite Against Book Bans, the website to enjoy the fight against censorship. Scan this QR code to get our webinar, to get to the website for tons of resources that will help you combat censorship at the community, state, and national level. If you want great books like the ones discussed today to reach your patrons directly, please be sure you have Booklist Reader on your shelves, share Booklist Reader digitally, or deliver Booklist unparalleled recommendations in print. Learn more at bit.ly Booklist Reader Print, or check out our website for more information about how to order your copies. Thank you for joining us today for this amazing webinar. One more tremendous expression of gratitude to our panelists and to our sponsors, Penguin Random House Library Marketing, Penguin Young Readers, and Random House Children's Books. And thank you out there. Thank you, librarians, library workers, educators, and readers for all your hard work and dedication, all your efforts to support the freedom to read. This concludes today's webinar. Stay well, everyone. See you next time.